How many books did I read in the first quarter? A lot. Let's take a look at them. Hey Dragonlings, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Skye. I'm a fantasy author who typically writes paranormal romance under the name SD Hegyes, and today we're going to talk about all the books I read in quarter one of 2025. I read a lot of books. Now, before I tell you the number, I do have to warn you that a lot of these books, there's three factors that come into play here with why I was able to read so many. The first is that I work night shift and I work by myself, and I have a lot of time to either listen to music, listen to YouTube videos, or listen to audiobooks, and I kind of alternate between the three. The second thing is that I listen to a lot of shorter works, novellas, short stories, and stuff like that, especially like Amazon's original short story series. I've listened to a lot of those. So if you're wondering how I'm able to read so many books, that is why. Please do not compare your numbers to mine. Do not feel that you are not reading enough. Do not feel that you're reading too many. What you're able to read is what you're able to read, and what I'm able to read is what I'm able to read. So I don't want you to go around judging me or yourself and comparing our numbers, okay? That being said, we're going to talk about 64 books, so this might be split into parts. I am not certain yet as I'm filming this. Editing Skye will determine that, and if I do, it'll be in the title whether this is part 1 or part 2. I'm going to use the same intro for both if it is split into multiple parts, so if you see this section multiple times, I apologize. It's just because of the length of this video in the end. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get started talking about all of these books. I am going to disappear off the screen so that you can see the title and cover of the book, and yeah, we're just gonna zip right on through this and get through as many as we can in this video and see what I had to say about all of these. I'm not gonna necessarily talk in depth about all of them. I will at least tell you whether or not I liked the book, didn't like the book, or so on and so forth. But ones I do have additional thoughts on, I will spend a little bit more time on. Alright, with all of those caveats aside, let's go ahead and take a look at the books I read this previous quarter. The first book I read was called The Detour by Kay Bromberg. Best-selling Harley Humbug finds herself stuck in a Christmas-themed town days before Christmas and finds solace and inspiration of the local bartender. This was a Christmas-themed short story, and it was the second story I've read by this author. I really enjoyed the first one, and this one takes place in the same town as the first one. However, this is labeled as like a Christmas romance, and romance has either a happily ever after or happily for now, and usually the couple is like together. This is not the way this one works out, and to me this was not a romance. So while I liked the story, I felt like it was rushed. The ending of it was rushed, and it felt incomplete. It felt like it needed more to tie everything together. The next few books I read were all from the same series, the Improbable Meet Cute series, the first one being The Exception to the Rule by Christina Lauren. On February 14th, an accidental email to a stranger opens the door to an unexpected relationship between two people who check in with each other once a year. In this series, this was actually my most favorite. It was a different play on a romance and how it builds up, because the characters do not meet each other across the span of years. They literally come to fall in love with each other through emails sent once a year. And it was an adorable concept. Next I read Worst Wingman Ever by Abby Jimenez. An amusing mistake turns into a lovely exchange of anonymous notes, little acts of kindness, and a growing affection between two strangers. This one was also cute, and I really enjoyed it. When Rosie finds herself accidentally locked inside a flotation device, her savior comes in the form of a firefighter whose dreamy voice and flirty sense of humor are the only things keeping her calm. I really enjoyed this one. Next I read Drop, Cover, and Hold On by Jasmine Guillory. It takes nothing less than a natural disaster to throw two opposites together, trapping a young woman in a bakery with its impossibly rude and insufferably handsome owner and head baker. This was actually one of the few stories in this series where the characters had already met and already knew each other. It's just that there was some misunderstandings between them, and it was super cute. Next I read With Any Luck by Ashley Poston. Every person she kisses finds their true love, and it's never her. So when her best friend disappears before his wedding, she assumes the worst and retraces her steps to find the missing groom with the help of the best man. I really enjoyed this one. It was also one where they knew each other and hadn't really gotten along before, but they come to get to know each other better throughout the events that happened in the story. Last in the series was Royal Valentine by Soraya Wilson. Valentine's Day becomes a Roman holiday for a princess in disguise when she switches places with her assistant, and a handsome photographer with a sexy Scottish burr offers to be her guide. This was actually my least favorite of the series, and I really couldn't tell you why. There was just something about the execution of the premise that just did not vibe with me, and I did not really have a good time reading it. I actually almost DNF'd it a couple times just because I was like, it's not that the storyline wasn't believable, it was just one of those things where some of the events were just so over the top that it felt too extravagant for a normal person to believe it happening. But then again, this is a princess and it's not a normal person, so maybe that's where the disillusionment comes in on my side. Like I said, it wasn't a bad story, it just wasn't my favorite of the 6. Next, I read The Perfect Play by G.S. Carr. When a small-town librarian wakes up next to the sexiest player in the NFL with a headache and a wedding ring on her finger, they set out to find out what happened the night before and prove that when opposites attract, their chemistry can be game-changing. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was super adorable. Next was Tarot and Soulmates by Laura Guest. When a tarot reading reveals her fiancé isn't the one for her but someone else entirely, a young woman sets out on a mission to find her true soulmate. I did not enjoy this one as much as I thought I would. Based on the premise and the cover, I thought it was going to be great for me to read, but unfortunately, it just didn't land as well with me as I would have liked. And I think part of that is because that I'm not a fan of any kind of cheating, and in this particular case, she found out that her fiancé was not the one for her, that someone else was. And rather than breaking off her engagement with her fiancé, when she finally does meet the person who is supposed to be her soulmate, she ends up trying to fit in time with her soulmate, and they do end up kissing each other when both of them are in relationships with other people. And that just drove me bonkers, and I could not stand it. Like, they didn't go any further beyond that. But the fact that it went that far in the first place just annoyed me. She already knew days, weeks before this particular event happened that her fiancé wasn't her soulmate. Why didn't she just break off the engagement before meeting her actual soulmate? I understand the idea of maybe not believing the tarot reading and thinking that it could have been wrong, but especially like once she met the person who was supposed to be her soulmate and she realized that yes, there is a connection there, I didn't understand why she didn't break off the engagement before trying to pursue a relationship with that person who was her soulmate. And because of that, I did not enjoy this book, but that doesn't mean others won't. Next, I read Poison Heart by Mae Pierce. Anita has a secret, and it's not that she's been madly in love with her standoffish husband since the day they met. Roman needs a meeting with the famed gardener to ask for the poisoner's help. Too bad he married her. This one I really enjoyed reading until we hit the 3/4 mark. I love the relationship between these two. I wasn't really thrilled with her husband, Roman, throughout the first quarter of the story, but once he realizes that his wife is the gardener, and once he comes to know why she's hiding who she really is and how she's been able to hide it for so long and all that, all the nuance behind all that, he basically worships the ground she walks on, and it's freaking amazing to see how their dynamic changes and to watch him slowly fall in love with his wife. However, that being said, there is a distinct part of the book that feels like that should have been the end. That should have wrapped up the storyline very nicely. It finished the book, basically, in my opinion. However, from that point onward till the actually end of the book, we jump within each chapter of the book that follows. It feels like it was an epilogue that was just taking too long, because we jump years multiple times. We see different instances of their lives multiple times. We even go as far and traveling throughout the years until we are meeting the future possible partners of their grandchildren. And it just felt like that portion of the book should have been a single chapter epilogue, or better yet, another story entirely featuring that granddaughter as the main character. And it felt like it was tacked onto this particular book for no good reason. And it ruined the ending of the book for me for that reason. So while I liked 3/4 of the book, once I hit that point, if I were to read this again, which I wouldn't mind doing, I would probably stop at that 3/4 mark where there was that distinct ending, because everything after that just felt like it was another story entirely. Next, I read Here for the Cake by Jennifer Milliken. Paisley needs a date to a wedding she can't skip, since the bride is her sister, the groom is her ex, and she's the maid of honor. When she runs into Klein, an aspiring author allergic to social media she knew in college, they pen a deal that benefits them both. This one was a super cute story, and I really enjoyed it. It was actually one of the top contenders of being my favorite through the quarter. Next, I read Almost Like Being in Love by Soraya Wilson. A modern-day Ohio woman and a 17th century Scottish laird fall in love at first sight when Maren and her friend Penny are caught and saved during a storm while on a trip in the Scottish Highlands. Time travel books are hit or miss for me, and unfortunately this one was a miss. I didn't like the first story I read from Soraya Wilson, which was Royal Valentine. That was the first time I'd read one of her stories, but I decided to give her another try, and unfortunately this one didn't do it for me either. I still plan on reading more from Soraya Wilson just to try it, because I have a couple of her books that have been sitting in my Kindle for a bit, but it's starting to feel like if I read a couple more and they're just not vibing with me, unfortunately it's probably going to be looking like this is just not an author for me. Next, I read Broken Perfect Lives by Katie Wismer. She's everything he hates as a pop star, living a double life, but he's the only one who can keep her safe since a stalker killed her last bodyguard. I haven't read that many bodyguard romances, but I have enjoyed them, so I thought I might like to try this one. Plus, I've read Katie Wismer's books before, and I really enjoyed them, and I was pleased to know that I liked this one as well. Next, I read Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. Britta's an ambitious waitress hoping to buy the bar she works at. Sumner's an NHL hopeful with an expiring green card. When the rest of the hockey team convinces her to marry him, he'll have a year to prove they're meant to be. I really enjoyed this one. It's supposedly the first in a series, and if they come out with more, especially if there's one featuring her brother, I wouldn't mind reading it. Next was Lucky Suit by Lauren Blakely. Kristen is done with her grandmother setting her up on dates, deciding to let a dating app algorithm choose her perfect man. So when she starts chatting with Cameron, he's everything she's looking for. Meeting him in real life, though, something's not matching up right. This one was super cute, and I really enjoyed it, especially when it was like one of those where I kind of figured out what was going on, and then when it was confirmed, I was just tickled pink that I was able to figure it out prior to the reveal. Next, I read What the Hex by Alexis Daria. Catalina returns home for her sister's wedding, only to find her brother-in-law-to-be demon-possessed, and the rest of her family under a spell. With the help of her sexy nemesis since childhood, Kat only has 3 days to figure out what's going on and prevent a demon from destroying her family. I apparently have a thing about sisters returning for sisters' weddings. At least this one dealt with magic. I really enjoyed this one. It was actually, for as short as it was super cute and fun to read. There was only one particular thing I did not like about this book, and that was the addition. They're on a time crunch. They have 3 days to figure out the spell and prevent it, and yet the two characters at one point did take time to have some smexy times, and it just felt like it was shoehorned in, unfortunately. And especially when they're like on a deadline and they're trying to figure the spell out, it felt like it was forced in there when it didn't really need to be, because the story worked without it, and I was just a little disappointed about that. But that's a personal preference thing more than anything else, not necessarily anything wrong with the story. Next, I read Broken Angel by Kay LeBlanc. This is a prequel novella short story that comes before the series Angels of the Secret Order. Somehow, Allison found herself in the orbit of the college campus king, Zeb, and even though she should run, she isn't sure she wants to, even if he isn't what he seems, even if he's determined to destroy her. This is set up to be... This was one of those that I had gotten free for signing up for an author's newsletter, and unfortunately, I saw the cover, I saw that it was like an angel or fallen angel story, and I was like, oh, let me read. And I did not read the description that goes with it. If I had, I probably wouldn't have picked it up because it's set up like a bully romance, except for because of how short it was. To me, it didn't feel like... There's a lot of time skips as they get to know each other, which is fine, but because of how short it is, I didn't feel the connection grow between them. To me, he spent more time as just an asshole to the main character, Allison, than anything else. And by the end of the story, I didn't feel that there was any real romance between them. Plus, there was a big time skip from her being a teenager in college to an adult. And that portion of the story just felt rushed. I felt like it would have been... we could have like cut that out completely and spent more time developing the actual relationship between these two, and it would have been a much stronger, much better story, because it just felt in some ways that he went from bullying her to possessing her. He went, and yes, I realized the possession was due to keep her safe, but at the same time it felt a very much, she's mine, you can't touch her, you can't have her kind of thing. And it bothered me that she was okay with it when there was no real explanation as to why she was okay with it. Like, there was no build up to to her. It went from, I should run from him, I should do all this, to, okay, he can do what he wants. And I was just not happy with that. Next, I read Oh What Fun by Chandler Baker. 3 children return home with children of their own and significant others in hopes of gaining some Christmas cheer from their mom, who always has everything together for the holidays. But something's off key this year, and it's not the Christmas carols. I bitched about this one in a previous vlog when I read it, because it's one of those stories, it was super quick to read, and it had an interesting premise. It also had an interesting writing style, because you can never really tell who the narrator is. By the end of the story, we come to know that the narrator is supposed to be one of the 3 children, though it's never explained which one of them is the narrator, if any of them at all. But the other thing that I just ended up not liking about it was the fact that it was one of those stories, like most stories have like some kind of lesson or experience that happens. And in this particular case, it felt like we were going to get through the story and like it was going to be like a Christmas Carol, like, or a Grinch type story where their heart grew 3 sizes bigger, or they learned the true spirit of Christmas. Except for that's not what happened. By the end of the story, everything that the family had been doing at the beginning of the story, everything went back to the way it was before, even with all the screw-ups and everything that happened, and there was no lesson learned. And because of that, I absolutely hated this book. Coming off that one, I read Resting Scrooge Face by Megan Quinn. When 2 exes with grudges against Christmas unknowingly start writing one another as nameless pen pals, they start writing their own love story that may erase itself when they come face to face. This gave off very much of a vibe of You've Got Mail, Christmas-themed You've Got Mail, but instead of exchanging emails, they exchanged letters anonymously. And it was a super cute story, especially in comparison to the one I had read before, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Next was my first DNF of the quarter. It was Slippery Business by Kathy Banks. A hockey player with his eyes on the goal and a small-town librarian trying to find her way are united by a secret crush and a second chance. The way this is described, I was expecting a hockey romance, which is not a problem. I don't have a problem with that at all. However, these characters are described to be in their late 20s, early 30s, and yet the way they were acting was so juvenile, it felt like they were high school students. And part of that could be the fact that it was supposed to be set up as a sweet romance, but there are ways to do sweet romances where the characters still feel like adults, and in this particular case, they didn't. They felt like teenagers. This story read like it should have been about high school hockey players. Not even college age. High school college players or hockey players. And I did not enjoy it at all. So I finally just put it down and set it aside because it was not for me. Next, I read The Upside Down Christmas by Kate Forster. Marlo's flatmate, Alex, tries to turn her grinchy feelings towards Christmas upside down after her boyfriend ghosts her, showing her how Australia does Christmas. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It was a fantastic read. And it actually made me want to read more by this author who I'd never read before. Next was The Bad Wedding Date by Vicky James. When her best friend fails to show up as her fake date to her sister's wedding, Charlotte's desperate enough to ask a random stranger at the bus stop to be her stand-in boyfriend. But Fraser isn't all he seems, and he has his own agenda involving Charlotte. I liked this one until I realized what Fraser's involvement with her best friend not showing up. And after that, it just went downhill for me. I did not see how she could fall in love with this particular main character. I did not feel the romance between them. There was nothing but lust, not love, and it left a sour taste in my mouth that I still, to this day, cannot get out. And while I did finish the book, I did discover basically this kind of story is not for me. Next, I read A Model Home by J. Courtney Sullivan. Katie and Damien look like the perfect couple on camera, but behind the scenes, they're on rocky terms. With their contract up for renewal, Katie is desperate to keep up appearances, and there's one thing she excels at: negotiations. I was really excited about this one because of the fact that it's marked as a romance. It is not a romance. I was expecting some kind of story where the two main characters learn to love each other again, and spoiler alert, that is not what happens at all. By the end of this short story, because it was fairly quick, I hated all of the characters. All of them. Katie was a conniving little bitch. Damien was a weak-willed bastard, I guess. I don't know what else to really call him. The two kids were spoiled brats who basically needed to have... I don't condone spankings. I don't condone physical violence against children. But these two children were so terrible that I just wanted to beat the motherfuckers up. And the assistant, whose main job was to keep the children in line, was the worst of all of them in some ways, and the least of all of them, but best of all of them in others, because she did keep the children in line to a certain extent, but that was by putting ideas in their heads that did not need to be in their heads for children. So I hated everyone, and I really did not enjoy the story, and it's not a romance like it was marketed to be. Next, I read Gingerbread House Flip by Kara Wilder. Nick and Holly are the best house flippers in the business, but they can't stand one another. However, when they are both invited to compete in a Gingerbread Village charity event, they'll set aside their differences and learn what they have in common. This is advertised as an enemies to lovers. It's advertised as if they don't like each other. The problem is they don't really know each other. At the beginning of the story, they have met each other in passing by, heard of each other, but they've never actually met one another at the beginning of the story. They're literally only rivals because they're both competing in this event. They don't actually know each other until this event. So while this is set up to be like an enemies to lovers, or described to be an enemies to lovers, it's not, because they don't know one another. And as they get to know one another, they get along just fine. So I was expecting an enemies to lovers, maybe there was some like bad history between them, and there was nothing, because there was no history between them. And it was rather annoying that it was advertised as an enemies to lovers because of that. Otherwise, it was a cute story. Next, I had my next DNF. It was called How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. Dory and Cole have been enemies since high school, but a small town competition will have them competing against one another and thawing the ice between them in many ways. I had to stop reading this because it is advertised as enemies to lovers, which I love. I love a good enemies or rivals. I prefer rivals to lovers. But something happened to Story and Cole that made them not like one another. And I use that term loosely because Story had no problem with Cole. Cole had all of the problems with Story, and Story returns back to town to help her aunt, who's had an accident, and she usually is the one that does this event, this competition, and she takes her aunt's place in the competition because her aunt can't do it. That's why Story's in town. Cole, who doesn't like Christmas to begin with, hates it. He's very much the Grinch character. He only joins the competition because he doesn't want Story to win. He feels like Story is an outsider. He feels like she doesn't belong. He doesn't care that she's only doing it to help her aunt. He wants to make sure she doesn't win. So he joins a competition he hates already just to make sure she doesn't win. And I hated that. And I DNF'd it that moment that settled in. And I was just like, nope, can't do this. Next, I read My December Darling by Lauren Asher. As her sister's bridesmaid, Catalina must play nice with the best man, Luke, even though he's her ex's best friend. At least until after the wedding, when she'll be off to her next job. But Luke is determined to get her to stay at his side, even once the wedding's over. Put together in different scenarios that were just super cute and I really enjoyed. However, it just wasn't advertised correctly in my opinion. But that could have been the way I could have been a misunderstanding on my part. I did enjoy reading this. It was adorable. Speaking of adorable, the next book I read, Home Shot Holiday by John Bird, Kelly Goodner, and Tommy Hudson. Through TV show miscommunication and rambunctious manipulations from a precocious 12-year-old, Kevin and Mary bond over a gift of an limited edition poinsettia angel. This one was super adorable, and I liked the fact that I listened to this one on audiobook, and it wasn't a full cast, but there was a lot of different voices for the different characters, and on top of that, anytime there was like TV ads or things like that, it really did have that staticky sound of TV and radio, and I really enjoyed that thematic element that was added. So it was an adorable read. Next, I read The Christmas Star by Kate Forster. When Julia's awful stepsister brags she's dating a pilot, she snaps and says she's dating heartthrob movie star Hugo Turner. The problem, she doesn't know him. Only Sam, a normal man with similar features to the movie star, who's willing to play pretend. This one was a great time all around. It was adorable. And I really liked the fact that in this particular case, she says that she's dating the movie star Hugo Turner, but it wasn't her idea. In fact, actually, Sam is the one that pushes her to tell her stepsister that she's dating Hugo Turner. Like, he is all gung-ho for this fake dating scenario, and it is adorable, and I loved this entire story, and I will probably read it again at Christmas time because it was super cute. Of the Kate Forster books I've read so far, this one was my favorite. Next, I read After the Fairy Tale by Terrence Gray, Aaron Day, and Ian Thake. I apologize if I got that wrong. Amanda's home from shooting The Bridegroom, a reality dating show, but can't tell anyone she's engaged as the show airs, which makes rekindling her friendship with her childhood friend Josh even more unexpected. For the most part, I liked this book. However, there is a scenario of basically the third act breakup with her and the friend that I didn't feel was necessary. He knew she was on this TV show. He knew that there was a possibility she was a winner. She was trying to pursue a friendship, not a relationship, and yet he kept pushing for a relationship, not a friendship, which would have been fine, except for when he finds out more information about the show and he finds out that she is engaged, he gets upset with her like it's her fault, like she should have told him when she was under contract not to say anything to anyone, and she was adamant that they were friends, not lovers. So that part annoyed me, and I just didn't like that. But otherwise, this was a super cute story that I thoroughly enjoyed. Next, I read The Best Worst Christmas by Kate Forster. As if returning home from Australia wasn't bad enough, Lily finds her mum now dating the neighbor, her ex's father. Years ago, Tom broke her heart, and now her mum and his father want them to play nice for the holiday. This one was adorable, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a second chance romance mixed with kind of sort of enemies to lovers. It was cute, and I really, really enjoyed it. Next is 'Tis the Season to Be Bitten by P.S. Nail. Birdie didn't intend to claim the tall, jaw-droppingly gorgeous wolf shifter at the tree farm, but she couldn't help herself. Sebastian's determined to show Birdie that even though he's 6 years younger than her, sealing their mating bond will be worth everything. I felt like this one was too short. It needed to be longer. There was there was things that happened that needed to be fleshed out more, in my opinion. I wanted more details. I wanted to know more about her reasons why they couldn't be together, because it felt like the moment he said there's really no reason for us not to be together, she was all gung-ho for it, when supposedly the whole point of the story was that she was against the relationship and he was supposed to be trying to convince her that yes, they can work. And the turnaround was just too quick. And I think it's another one of those stories where, yes, I realized that in order to seal the mating bond in this particular story, in this particular world, they have to consummate the relationship in order to seal that bond. But honestly, I think this is another one of those stories where it would have worked more without the smexy time scenes if we had used that time to flesh out more of the motivations behind the different characters' thoughts and feelings about different things, especially like where her thoughts and feelings were concerned as far as why they couldn't be together. We got a lot of backstory about their relationship when they were both younger from his point of view, but none from her point of view. And it would have been really interesting to see more of their previous relationship when she was his tutor before she left town at 18, to see how their relationship went from them as kids to them as both of them consenting full-aged adults. Next, I read Not Another Christmas Rom-Com by A.J. Pine. When Molly drunkenly spills her secrets to her seatmate Liam on the plane, she never realized she'd see him again. And she definitely never realized he was about to become her in-law. This one was super cute. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I don't think it's the first one I've read by A.J. Pine, but I definitely will be reading more from A.J. Pine. Next, I read Love Bites. This is the first book in the Mated to the King series. It's by Lola Glass. When Blair's siren family becomes the target of a dangerous wolf pack, she turns to the Vampire King for help, the same king she recently kissed and fed from, and he makes it clear he only wants one thing: Blair. This one was okay. There were some things about it that I did not like, but that could have been the fact that those kind of things in the stories, those tropes, were just not things for me, but it was a good read otherwise. Next, I read Tie Me Not. This is the first book in the Ghost Cupid series by Ali Brahms. Chris works for a ghost matchmaking agency, but when they get a ghost bride who insists she was murdered, she joins forces with her boss's grandson, Zen, I'm not certain how to pronounce that, I apologize, in order to find out who killed their client. This one was a good story. I thoroughly enjoyed it, definitely more than I did Love Bites, and I actually hope to continue on with the series. The second book is out, and I think I have it, but I'm not positive about that, and I can't wait to read it. Next was A Serenade to the Elf Queen. This is the first book in the Elven Fantasy Romance series by Nero J. Hale. Queen of Elfheim, Rhiannon swore death upon her sister's murderer, the Fae King, and she soon finds an opportunity to take that chance. But a song is pulling her toward a different path, and an immortal vampire. This is a book that I wish I had DNF'd, and I almost did. I was about halfway through it, and I was trying to decide if I wanted to continue it or not, but I kept hoping that it would just get better, and it never did. It feels like a story where there's just too many characters with similar names and too much plot tucked into one storyline. And there was just so much going on that I really couldn't follow it that well. And I really did not have a fun experience reading it. And I just probably, when I got to that point where I was questioning whether or not I should read it and should finish it, I probably just should have set it aside and just not finished it. Because by the end of the book, I was just not happy with what I'd read. And I did not like it. As a palate cleanser, I picked up Noodle and the No Bones Day by Jonathan Graziano. Noodle is Jonathan's pug, but one day when Jonathan goes to take him for a walk, Noodle flops, as if he woke with no bones. I have seen a couple of videos from this creator where they check to see if it's a bones or no bones day, and it's super cute, and this is just a book based on that. I don't know which came first, the book or the videos, but either way, it doesn't matter. It was an adorable, cute storybook that I loved. Next, I read the book that is my favorite book of the quarter, and possibly my favorite book of the year, because even to this day, I am still thinking about this book off and on. And it is called Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. It is the first in the duology of the same title. Simi is one of the Mamiwata, a mermaid who collects souls from the sea. But when she one day saves a living boy, Kola, It starts her on an adventure to ask forgiveness from the gods for breaking ancient decrees. This is like a mix of Christian Hans Andersen's Little Mermaid, the original tale, mixed with African mythology, and I am obsessed. It was an excellent story. Like I said, hands down, my favorite of this quarter, probably my favorite of the year so far. I have not read one that stands up quite to the same appeal as this one. And I don't know if it was because of the book or the narrator. I'm not positive. It doesn't really matter. It was hands down freaking amazing. And I thoroughly enjoyed every second I had with it. And it's one of those books where it stands on its own. And I'm actually a little terrified to read the sequel because part of me doesn't think it's going to be able to stand up to the same level as this one. And I'm afraid this one, the way it ends, is kind of bittersweet. And it feels like a standalone novel that doesn't need a sequel. And in my mind, if the sequel is not as beautiful as this one, it's gonna ruin the whole series for me. And I'm scared to read the sequel. I want to read the sequel, but I'm scared to, because if it doesn't measure up, I'm just gonna be so sad, because this one can work on its own as a standalone. And I kind of want to just leave it as standalone versus reading the sequel. Will I read the sequel? Yes. When? I don't know. Next, I read Bite Me by Ariel Dawn. Chance has to find his mate by Christmas or he'll become a giant gingerbread man for the rest of his life. Holly wants a romance like the movies, but can she find love with a man she met dressed like Santa and hiding such a tantalizing secret? I straight up will admit that I read this one out of curiosity more than anything else. I love a good shifter romance, but him shapeshifting into a gingerbread man seems kind of ridiculous. This one is advertised as the first in the series, however it's been out for a few years and there's no sequels, because it was highly amusing even if it wasn't like the best piece of literature out there. It was a lot of fun more than anything else, and that's okay. Speaking of fun, the next one I read, My Inherited House Might Be Haunted by A.J. Sherwood, was also a lot of fun. Rhett just inherited a house, and according to the letter left for him, it's haunted. He'll need the help from a local witch, Calix, in order to figure out his grandmother's wishes for him and the house. Adorable, hands down. I really loved the relationship that developed between the two men, Rhett and Calix, and how they just basically supported one another and lifted each other up while still trying to figure out what was going on and why, and it was just super sweet and adorable, and I loved it. Next, I read Chosen Guardian by Courtney Pearson. This is the first book in the Stolen Tears series. Ambry lives in a world where no one has emotions and tears grant wishes, so when she gets her hands on a vial of tears, it paints a target on her back. She'll need the help of a rogue soldier, Talon, if she's going to survive. This one I really liked, so much so that I read the next book in the series, Chosen Dreams by Courtney Pearson, the second book in the Stolen Tears series. I cannot tell you the description of the sequel book, unfortunately, because it does give spoilers away for how the first book ended, because they follow directly after one another. Following Chosen Dreams, I read the third book in the series, Chosen Fate by Courtney Pearson, the third book in the Stolen Tears series. The way this book ended, it sounds like there's going to be another book in the series. However, this book has been out for a few years, and there's not any talk that I can find of another book. So, unfortunately, I don't know if there's going to be more of this series. If there is, I will read it, because I have enjoyed following these characters' stories, and I want to know how those stories end. But as it stands right now, I don't know if we're going to get it. Next, I read Rock Me Hard by S.K. Allison. Rex, the lead singer of the band Nocturne, needs a nanny for his 5-year-old daughter. Enter Harper. She's a little strange and her methods a little unorthodox, but she understands how to get Stella on her side and is Rex's last hope. This one was a rock star romance, and I haven't read too many of those, but I have enjoyed the ones I read, and I liked this one just as well. Next, I read Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendare Blake. This is the first in the Anna duology. Like his father before him, Cass kills the dead. So when he hears about a ghost called Anna dressed in blood, he starts investigating the ghost. But Anna's story is stranger than he realized, and the same creature that killed his father is now hunting him. This one is up there competing for one of my most favorite books of the year. I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I will be reading the sequel. I read this one through the Libby app, listening to the audiobook, and I'm on hold for the second book, so that's the only reason I haven't started it yet. I'm like 27th in line for something that has been out for many, many years, but the library only has one copy of it apparently. I'm not quite certain what's going on there. I am on hold waiting for this book so that I can finish the series because I'm really interested to see how it ends, because this one ends on such a cliffhanger that I need to know. I need to know. Next, I read Forbidden Attraction by R. O'Leary. This is the first in the Raven Falls series. Louisa's new start in Raven Falls isn't going well, and a target is put on her back when she helps an injured dog that's not a dog at all, but a wolf shifter named Jack. This one was super cute, and I really enjoyed it. I do not know, though, if I will be continuing on with the series, because each book in the series follows a different member of the pack. Next, I read Potions, Poisons, and Policies by Courtney Thorne. Henry just wants to focus on her studies, but when someone attacks her campus with a love potion, she's forced to find a solution with her academic rival Noah, the only other one unaffected by the potion's effects. This one was advertised to me as, like, if you are a fan of Hermione, which is the Draco-Hermione pairing from Harry Potter, and I'll admit, I have never read any Hermione fanfiction. I have no desire to, but I kind of wanted to see what the fuss was about. And if you had not told me that this was based on Hermione fanfiction from the beginning, I would have gone through the entire book without knowing, because there isn't really a lot of similarities other than the fact that Henry's name starts with an H, and they're both like the brightest students of their class. But while she dislikes Noah, she doesn't hate him, and he hasn't really done anything to her that could make her hate him, and he definitely doesn't hate her. They're only academic rivals because, like, they push each other as far as academic grades go. He's at the top of the class, she's trying to get to the top of the class. That's literally where their rivalry comes in, and that's it. She doesn't care about anyone or anything because of that. She's too focused on her studies to care. And like I said, other than that, there is no similarities between Hermione fanfiction, in my opinion. I could be very wrong, but it doesn't feel, like I said, if you hadn't told me this was based on Hermione fanfiction, I would never have known. It is one of my favorites for the quarter, and I thoroughly had a good time with it. Next, I had another DNF. This was The Dragon Thief by Marissa Brandt from the series Almost a Dragon. Isabel is a half-dragon hiding amongst humans and selling dragon blood to those who are willing to pay. But someone's stolen a dragon egg, and another hybrid like herself has recruited her to find it or expose her, unintentionally or not, in order to find it. I only DNF'd this because my mood changed on what I wanted to read. I went through a little bit of a reading slump and I put it down, and I haven't picked it back up since. So I do plan on reading it. It's not that it was a bad book, I just DNF'd it because I got into that reading slump. The same is true for the next book, Peaches and Honey by R. Rada. This is part of the Peaches and Honey duology. When Anna was 17, she was burned alive for her vitiligo, but she did not die, for a shape-shifting god had given her a peach and granted her immortality. This one is so beautifully written. The prose is so gorgeous. However, the story is moving so damn slow throughout years. This one doesn't hide the fact that we're crisscrossing over the years. They're immortals, and we're passing different points in time with different events that are happening in each of these characters' lives, and I don't mind that. But it was going so slow that when I was already in a reading slump, as much as I was enjoying the writing, I just couldn't continue it. Do I plan on picking it back up? Yes, absolutely. Like I said, the writing is gorgeous, and I do want to read it because I want to know if these two characters get together. Because, like, I can tell they're in love because I read so much romance. But these two characters, it's not that they're idiots, it's just that the kind of things that they don't spend a lot of time together in order to see how that romance is building. I can see it building, but they between them can't, if that makes sense. And it was so good. It is so good. I almost hated that I DNF'd it, and I will be picking it up before the end of the year to finish it. It's just I didn't in the quarter. Next, I read Always a Bridesmaid by Erin Clark. Love is on the line when Randy, a bridesmaid for hire pretending to be her new client's best friend, meets Will, the groom's best friend who doesn't believe in love and mistrusts the bride and her friend. I thoroughly liked this one. I enjoyed the relationship and the way it built up and the way these characters got along. Next, I read The Conjurer's Wife by Sarah Penner. In 19th century Venice, a young woman's marriage to an illusionist hides secrets that go deeper than his spectacular acts. For it being a short story, this one was spectacular. It felt longer than it actually was, and not in a bad way. It was so good. It was so good, and I did not see that twist coming the way it happened. Did I have my suspicions about a few things? Yes, but the way that twist took and ended up was just so far out of left field that I was blinking at the pages going, what? What happened? Who did what with who for how many goodies? Next, I read Son of a Beach by Mia Sosa. Naomi and Donovan, work rivals, are forced to collaborate on M-Class magazine's inaugural swimsuit edition, all while on a romantic island. This one was rivals to lovers, and it was adorable the way it worked, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Next, I read A Walk in the Park by Rebecca Weatherspoon. When a mix-up at the local animal shelter leaves both Andre and Janelle as adoptive parents of the same dog, Zeus, they decide to try co-parenting the animal they both fell in love with. The concept of this one was super cute, plus the reason why there was a mix-up at the animal shelter in the first place was hilarious and left me giggling. Love this. Next, we have Coming Home by Kennedy Ryan. In college, Torre and Naomi were friends, but they've lost touch over the years. When Torre's daughter is announced homecoming queen, the pair have a second chance at more than friendship when Naomi is asked to interview Torre as alumni of their alma mater. This one was adorable, and I loved it. However, that being said, I did not love the next one. This one was called This Is Not Your Fault by Courtney Mom. Hal and Stacy are in the middle of a divorce when COVID hits, and being quarantined in their separate homes allows them to realize how much they might want to remain married as the pandemic continues. This one is so interesting to categorize because I didn't like it, not for the reasons that you might think. It's written as I think it's called epistolary. I think that's the term. Where it's written as letters back and forth, except for those letters are not from the two main characters because they're going through a divorce. The letters are from their lawyers to each other, or like her in her therapy sessions with her therapist. None of these letters are actually to each other. And the way it ends, it feels like it's leading in a certain direction, but we don't actually get that resolution because of the way it's written in the letters. So I'm not quite certain how I feel about it. It's the description aims that it's going to be like a second chance romance, but because of the way it's written, I don't see how it could be that way, if that makes sense. I can't really describe what I'm talking about without giving away spoilers, so I'm trying not to do that. It's not that it was a bad book, it wasn't as satisfying for me personally as I would have liked. Next was a book I was disappointed by completely, and that's called Zolly's Dog by Adam Wilson. Paul is used to Zolly disappearing for a day or two at a time, but when he's gone longer than that, and he finds Zolly's dog tied to a tree with a belt on the same day he's supposed to be at his son's 14th birthday party, he makes the executive decision to stage her escape and drop her off at a local shelter, but no good deed goes unpunished. I read this one when I was just going through that reading slump and trying to get back on the bandwagon, and I was thinking that maybe just listening to a whole bunch of random Amazon shorts would do it for me, and this one just did not hit right and I did not enjoy it. Same could be true by this next book called Townie by Neil Patel. Amal and Bridget form a fast and intoxicating relationship, getting drunk, party hopping, and binge watching TV, but a secret changes the dynamic of their relationship and Bridget does something she can't take back. I have to warn you that there is definite transphobia in this one. And I can't say too much more without giving away the twist at the end of the story, but if that is something triggering for you, I do not suggest reading this one at all, because it gets violent and graphic very fast. I did enjoy the story up until that point, and that hit me out of left field because I was not expecting it. So it's a good story, don't get me wrong, but I'm just warning you that this is my trigger warning for you. There is transphobia in it, and it is very violent and graphic in its nature. So if that is not something you can handle, I would not suggest reading this. Next, I read Nadine by Vimy Bahaj. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I apologize. A young woman in India about to plunge into an arranged marriage seeks the advice of an older friend, Nadine, an eccentric expat who has led an unconventional life. Unfortunately, I didn't like this one either. Just like with Zolly's Dog, it just wasn't for me, and I probably shouldn't have read it. Next, I read The 5-Year Hitch by Melissa de la Cruz. Sam and Miles belong together, except every 5 years there's a hitch and they don't end up together. And now they're telling a reporter the story in hopes their luck will change and they can break the 5-year curse together. I have read Melissa de la Cruz before, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. The books I've read from her in the past deal with like vampires, and this is very contemporary in its feeling. No vampires to be found. It was very good though, and I enjoyed it. Next, I read Bridesmaids by Sydney Smith. When Cooper returns home to attend his best friend's wedding as her bridesmaid, he never thought he'd run into his high school crush. But Will is the best man, and avoiding the smoking hot man will be nigh impossible. This one was fucking adorable. I loved every second of it. The secondhand embarrassment was not too much for me, which is thoroughly enjoyable when I can actually stand it. And the storyline was just cute. I loved it. The only thing I have against it, and this is not against it, this is just more I want it, is there is a point in the story where Will is reading his groomsman speech, and we never get to hear the groomsman speech. I want to know what he said in his groomsman speech. Sydney Smith. I need the groomsman speech. I need to know what he said. I need to know. Next, I read We Are the Water People by Troy Onyango. When fishermen on Nam Lawe return with the body of a young boy, the close-knit island is thrown into mourning, and they all suspect foul play in the death of the child. This story is told in 3 different perspectives, and it was such an interesting way of doing it, because through these 3 different views, we come to know more about the boy who was killed, what happened to him, why he was killed, and it's just a heartbreaking tale. I thoroughly enjoyed this for that reason, and I would love to read more from Troy in the future. Next, I read Dear Seraphina by Avery Bishop. Seraphina is a glamorous young actress with an obsessed fan who writes letters to her that get more and more disturbing, revealing further plots and wrongdoing and revenge as admiration becomes obsession. This is another one that's written in epistolary form between the letters and stuff and letters and emails. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did not see the twist coming. There was actually 2 kind of twists. For the most part of the story, we're following the letters of this fan of Seraphina, and then we start getting the person that starts investigating her, as well as a third perspective that I cannot say without revealing the twist. But between these 3 perspectives, we get to see how this obsession started and how it ended. And it's just, it was so good. It was so good. Next, I read The Werewolf's 15 Minutes by Jonathan Mayberry? Gary is an ordinary guy struggling to find a job and spending time hanging out with his friends, but he's also a werewolf. When he decides to out himself on YouTube, Gary slowly becomes more and more obsessed with the attention, money, and fame being a werewolf awards him. This story started off as amusing, but as the obsession grew more and more, it became darker. And not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I did, but I could see the obsession growing over time, and I was like, oh, this is not going to end well. And I cannot say how it ended without giving away, but it was good. That's all I can say. It was good. Next, I read Snapdragon by Kat Leigh. Snapdragon befriends her town's witch, Jax, and discovers the strange magic within herself, as well as a connection between her family and Jax. This was a graphic novel, and it was adorable. I loved every second of it, and I keep hoping it's like the first in a series. And it's not. It's a standalone, which I enjoy, don't get me wrong. But I want more from this world, and I want more from this character, and I want more from the other characters we meet in the story. And I'm just sad that we don't get more. The last book I want to mention that I read is The Doll's House by Lisa Unger. A widowed mother, ready to give love another chance, moves into her fiancé's old family home with her teenage daughter, but as they try to build a future together, the past refuses to let go. For such a short story, there was so much that happens in this book. So much. And it is creepy from start to finish. The fact that the family home has been upgraded to a smart house. There's some things going on with a doll that keeps moving around. There's possible ghosts. There's just so much happening in this story. It's not even funny. And I was spooked. It was such a good story and I loved it. But it was so spooky. So spooky. In a good way. It was spooky in a good way. But my God. What a way to end the quarter. Alright, and there you have it. That is all the books I read in the first quarter of the year. It was a lot. Most of them were short stories and novellas. There was a couple of novels mixed in here and there. And I'm really looking forward to telling you about all the books I've read in the second quarter, because I don't think it's quite as many, but there's still a few. Anyways, if that's all I have for you guys today, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, feel free to leave me any kind of book emoji. And that is all I have for you guys today. I will see you all in my next video. Bye, Dragon Wings.